Hey everyone, welcome to the Smiling Homeschooler Podcast. We're glad you can join us. As you can see, we have a couple special guests here who we will introduce in just a second. But before we do, I just want to say thank you to Teaching Textbooks for helping make the Smiling Homeschooler possible. They're an amazing math curriculum and an amazing partner, and we really appreciate their support. Also, thank you to Homeschooling Today magazine. They're just an amazing supporter of the homeschooling community, a great source of encouragement. And if you haven't subscribed, you definitely should over at homeschoolingtoday.com. But Dad, if you're ready to go ahead and get started, let's go.
Well, hey, everybody. It's been a week or so since I was with you because we've been on the road during doing some homeschool conventioning. And I've been super encouraged to meet lots of you moms. I love it when a mom comes up and says, "Oh, I'm a smiling homeschooler." It just warms my heart. But we're going to forgo the chit chat because we've got some special guests with us today. We have David and Sherly Quine from Cornerstone Curriculum, pioneers of the homeschool movement. And I don't know, David, before before we get you here involved, and you have a cat over your shoulder. I don't know if that should be he or she should be introduced.
Yeah, that's Thalo, and our Pyrenees golden retriever was here a few moments ago, but taking up the whole space.
I say okay.
She's a camera hog.
Right. I remember way before we even started the Smiling Homeschooler with Family Man Ministries. My wife and I, we were just new homeschoolers to the movement and to the whole homeschool scene. And I can remember going to maybe a homeschool convention in Indiana at the Indiana Convention Center downtown. And I can remember seeing the Quines there. I remember, I don't know, David, I don't know if your signature wardrobe piece was you always wore a crisp white shirt. And it was like starched. It looked like it was laundered, not with an iron, but by like somewhere else. But he always, and not that was what impressed me, but that did catch my eye. And we have been, for the last 21 years, we've been doing this. We started like when you were at halftime. But I'll just say right up front, David and Shirley, it is a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's our joy. And you can see I'm not wearing a white shirt.
I know. It's just really kind of disappointing, actually.
I could go get it if you want to hold.
That's right.
Right.
Well, Dad, didn't you used to do back in the day? Didn't you? Your signature was like Hawaiian shirts. I feel like.
Yes,
I feel like that was your thing for a little bit. Maybe the exact opposite, honestly. That were droopy and not starched by any means.
That's right. I pretty much perfected the wrinkle. Well, why don't you tell us? Because I'm sure there are some listeners who maybe not know who the Quines are, which is hard for me to believe. But why don't you tell us about your family and how you started homeschooling?
Yeah, for sure. There's nothing that we would be have more joy in than telling about our family. We have 9 children. That wasn't my original intent, but God began to move in my life and make some drastic changes for, I guess, family numbers 6, 7, 8, and 9. They're grateful that God intervened in my life so that they would have life. So we want to say a few things about who they are and what they do.
Well, we have 5 boys, 4 girls, and they're in their 40s and 30s now. And we have grandchildren, number 18 and 19 on the way. So
Wow.
we really praise God. For everyone's an answer to prayer, the children and the grandchildren, and just such a blessing, not just to us personally, but I think they're a blessing in each realm in which the Lord has taken them, and they're all completely different. One son's an attorney, one's a pilot trainer in the Air Force, one's an anesthesiologist, nurse anesthetist, and one is in business and one is in a Christian ministry. So those are the boys. And then the young ladies, 3 are mothers. And and the other one is a wonderful auntie and a great lady as well. So yeah, that's them.
So when you started this homeschooling thing back then, It was not a simple little choice, that it was one of the options. What took you down that life-changing route?
Yeah, well, like you say, it wasn't what we really thought that we would ever do. Though Shirley was an early childhood educator and specialist. So really between 0 and 5 or 6, she would do with our children what people would do today, and they would call it homeschooling, though homeschooling really didn't have a title back in 1975, 6, 7, 8, and 9. I was the director of the science program in the Richardson Independent School District, and I was hired because they wanted creation taught in the classroom, which was quite amazing. Our oldest son, Bryce, was, I guess, turning 6. We had enrolled him as a kindergarten kiddo at the school where my office was, and Shirley called me while I was at work, and what did you say?
Well, I just heard Raymond Moore on a Focus on the Family, and he told how it was especially important for boys not to enter into formal education until they became a little bit older. And Bryce was not reading yet. And we just wanted the very best for our kids. And so when I heard about this research and stuff, I said, David, you got to hear this. And in God's providence, they repeated the same, show in the evening that they played in the morning. He got to hear it. And we went to the library and came home with 7 books written by Dr. Raymond Moore. And a lot of people don't know who he is, but he's like the grandfather of home education. He really was the gentleman who brought it to the U.S. in the early 80s.
And he was a great researcher, and that's kind of what I am too. And I really caught the vision that he was expressing through the various books. Schools Can Wait, Better Late Than Early, the Homegrown Family, Homegrown Kids. And it was like, wow, this makes so much sense. My office was in a lower elementary, and even kindergarten, first and second graders, they had absolutely lost the joy of learning in this little in school. And I came home and said to Shirley, I want our children to love learning. I want them to fall in love with music and art and math and science. And that's not happening in schools. And what Dr. Moore was talking about was bringing life, really, true life to your home in education. And it was like, this is for us. And the crazy thing was, well, we had already enrolled him. It was still the summer. So it was kind of like, I got to go unenroll him. I wonder how this is going to go down. And so I went to the principal and I talked with him about our son. And he said, I think it's the wisest decision for you to keep your son at home. And it's like, wow, what a confirmation to us. And I guess 30 some years later, we have home educated all of our kids. So, it was.
So that's a while ago. So did you know anyone else? I mean, were you all kind of on your own during that time? And then kind of maybe leading off of that, what do you think, you've seen so much change over the years in homeschooling. What are some of those biggest things that have really, changed over the decades of homeschooling?
Yeah,
you're really right. There weren't a lot of people that were doing this.
The first year, really, I didn't know anybody else who was the first. Now, the second year, people like there were some other people who became homeschool leaders as well, whose sons were in the same kindergarten program that Bryce was going to be in. And they're calling me saying, what's the deal? Why isn't Bryson? We thought we were all going to be in school together. What's the deal? And so we told them about it. And the next year they started homeschooling too. So it was kind of quickly that some people heard about it and got excited and started homeschooling them. God called them to do it as well. So,
there was a lot of uncertainty at that time. I mean, we wanted the best for our kids educationally. We wanted the best for them in terms of cognitive development or intellectual development. We wanted the best for them in terms of social adjustment and most importantly for spiritual development in their lives. And it was like, well, how do you do this? And what's going to be some markers that are going to allow us to say, yes, this is what we want to do. And God quickly drew us to Deuteronomy chapter 6, and here God is telling Moses to teach parents who will teach their children, who will teach their grandchildren. And so Deuteronomy chapter 6 became the model for us. And it was and still is in terms of
Timothy 2:2 as well.
Yeah.
What you have learned from me, Paul says, these entrust to faithful men who will be able to teach others also. And so Paul to Timothy, to faithful men, to others. That, discipleship, we had been in Christian ministry before education, and that was our goal, was to win students to Christ and disciple them in the faith. And so this was just living out all that we had done in a more formal sense with college students. Now our family was our discipleship. So it just flowed, really.
And I really do believe that there's really no higher calling, personally, I think, for a mom and a dad. And there's no greater responsibility. It's a part of the fulfillment of the Great Commission. And here's our family right here, that we're going to just pour our lives into them, as Paul talked about in Thessalonians chapter 2, what a mother does and what a father does. And it's like, whoa, we have the opportunity to do with our children what God really prescribed in the Word. We do that, and then we encourage other families to do the same.
Well, how did you make that transition? Because you started homeschooling your children, and then somewhere along the way, and it says on your website, 1984, you decided to start Cornerstone Curriculum. What took you that direction? Was it because there was nothing else, but because you thought, we could do this better?
Well, how do you want to answer that?
Well, first of all, many times, like the great lion Aslan is chasing you, and you're not sure where he's chasing you to. You just know you're being chased. And that was kind of it at first, because as David said, he'd been the science director for the fourth largest district in the state of Texas, and then suddenly one day he's called in to his people ahead of him into their office, and they said, we have been told some things about you. Are you a Christian? Are you a creationist?
Yes.
Do you teach your children at home? And so as he was presented with all this and then told, if this is true, you're not going to be working in your job anymore. And so basically was told, you cannot remain here in this, and with these convictions and living the way you are with the goals that you have. No.
It was so amazing because it was such an open door. I mean, in 1980, a public school wanted creation taught in the classroom alongside evolution as a viable scientific explanation. It was like so amazing. That door opened up, and then all of a sudden it just closed. It was like, wow, what just happened?
Yeah.
But at the same time, for 4 or 5 years, I've been writing curriculum for Shirley, because we're just not textbook people, honestly. And so I would write for Shirley, and some of your friends would go, oh, I want to use this. And then one lady moved to Austin and said, hey, send these things down to me. And I said, oh, you can't read my handwriting. And she said, oh, get a typewriter. And I said, I can't afford a typewriter. She said, oh, I'll call a church, and the church will loan you. So now I'm typing out these lesson plans for this lady in Austin, who's now sharing it with her friends in Austin. And it's like, wow, God is just opening up this. It's more than amazing, honestly.
That's so cool.
How we got going, and our purpose really was to teach children how to reason from a biblical view of the world. And I think that means a lot of things, but one, it means it's an apologetic approach to education, and I think it's unique in that regard. Now, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead. I was going to say, expand upon that a little bit, because there are some people listening who might not really know what that apologetic means. Sure. You're not apologizing for anything. And is that, has that continued through Cornerstone Curriculum? Is that the heart of Cornerstone Curriculum?
It is for sure. It's that discipleship relationship that's teaching children not just what we believe, but why we believe what we believe. And as Peter said in 1 Peter 3:15, sanctify the Lord in your heart. Always be ready and preparing yourself to give an adequate defense for the hope that we have within us. And you do it with gentleness and reverence. And so our goal is to teach young adults, Christian adults, how to give a clear, concise explanation of the hope that we have in Christ in every subject, not just, at first when I became a Christian, I thought Christianity was just a small slice of my total life. But I came in touch with Francis Schaeffer, who said that, no, it's the totality of life. And so it's like, how can we teach young children the biblical view of economics or literature or music or art and all of these subjects? So that's our heart, that's our hope, that's our prayer, that we'll be assisting parents in the discipleship of their children for the next generation.
Now, the good news for everybody is that David was always a bright guy that understood stuff. Not me. I'm way behind, right?
No, it's not true.
And so, well, it was true. And so I'd say, well, I don't quite know what you mean, or I know you know how to teach this. You know how to teach this math lesson or this science lesson or this music lesson, but I don't. And so he devised a system of writing it in 2 columns where he would say, okay, well, this is what you're going to need. And then this is what you're going to do with these things that you're going to use, like manipulatives. And this is what you're going to say to teach the idea. And he made it in 2 columns. And all I had to do was just read the little script that he wrote for me. And the beautiful thing was that subjects that I never understood growing up, science and math and many other things, more into the serious, more Christian biblical things, he made understandable for me to teach our children. And so that it wasn't just they were learning, but I was learning too. And so I think that's been a big help to many people, because, a lot of people, we haven't necessarily grown up in a Christian home. We weren't churched, and we didn't have a lot of that. And so it's been a blessing, to be able to really, to be his student, first of all, kind of, and then to be able to pass that on down to our children.
Yeah, at first I'd write a lesson and I'd go off to work. I'd come back and say, oh, how did the lesson go? And Shirley go, it didn't go. I'd go, what do you mean it didn't go? How could it not go? And she said, it's inside of your head and it's not in mine.
Well, we'll touch back on that.
Shirley didn't want to have a workbook approach. She wanted to have a relational approach where she was having dialogue, intimate dialogue over the subjects with our children around a biblical framework of truth. And that's how we got started, and still our mission and still our passion. So
that's awesome.
Thanks for to be a part of this, because it gives us the opportunity to share our passion with families that probably don't know who in the world we are.
Well, you've been homeschooling for a long time, so we're going to pick your brain for some advice here in just a second. But before we do, I do have to thank our sponsors.
This wasn't one of the original questions.
No, it's all good. It's okay. But we do need to thank Teaching Textbooks for helping make the Smiling Homeschooler possible. They're just a partner we've worked with for many years. They're a great company, great math curriculum. And we think they're one of the best out there, and we really liked them. But we realize, and they realize, that there's other options. There's one size doesn't fit all. So they give you a free trial over at their website, teachingtextbooks.com, so you can check it out for yourself and see if it's good for your family. But we really appreciate their support.
We also want to thank Homeschooling Today magazine. Of course, their magazine is a printed source of encouragement. You can also get it digitally. But again, just a reminder about their podcast. I was looking over at some of their topics. Just in the last couple of days, they've had Debbie Sayer, who was a one of the founders of the Homeschooling Today magazine, that they're replaying one of her messages, and then another message or another podcast entitled "When It Feels Pointless." The repetition in the midst of this homeschooling life can leave us feeling like what we do is pointless sometimes. The amount of sowing that goes before a harvest can be wearisome, to say the least. And then they talk about how to homeschool through those moments. So if you want another great resource, I would check out some of their podcasts. They're short, and you can binge listen to them, maybe while you're sipping your lemonade and enjoying the summer swimming pool wherever you are. But we want to thank them, and you can check them out at homeschoolingtoday.com.
So I see on your website, I really like you have the learning cycle, and it's, kind of talking about how, again, which you've already kind of briefly discussed, is kind of applying what you're learning and understanding what the purpose is and reasoning. And you say here, you said, we believe in the little value in teaching children to remember. Let me re-say that. We believe there is little value in teaching children to memorize definitions or dates in order to pass a classroom exam. And then you're kind of talking about how reason is more important than just memorizing facts, which 100% agree. So there's all these moms out there who have all these pressures of so many different subjects, and there's, these huge, a massive amount of work that they can do, and they have all these things they think they need to keep up with. You've homeschooled now for a long, long time. What would you say to the mom who's just overwhelmed with all these things and pressures from the world that she thinks she has to hit everything? What would you say to that mom?
I'll say one word and I'll let you say a whole bunch of words. We were taught by Josh McDowell, keep it simple. Keep it simple. And homeschooling is like juggling, honestly. And you can't start juggling 5 balls at one time. Mm-hmm. You start with one, add another one. But keeping it simple is so, so very important. And then you have so many years. Don't be in a rush. Don't be in a rush. Okay, Shirley, I'll let you pick up from there.
Well, I think it's especially hard, it was for me, like in those early days when you're so concerned that your children learn to read. And we had a number of struggling readers. And that really drains you, and it really is difficult because you feel like, it's all on your shoulders, and that if you don't, if you're not able to bring them to this place where they can read it so that they can begin to learn on their own, then they're really going to struggle. And, again, some did, but even those that had difficulty reading have become phenomenally successful adults. Incredibly successful adults. And so I want to say to them, wait on the Lord, really, just every day. Bring it to his feet and ask him to give you the wisdom that you need to just accomplish what that day needs to be done. And I would also say that the most important thing we can do any given day is bring our kids to the Word, even if it's just for 5 to 10 minutes, that we just, like you were talking about, sowing the Word of God in their heart first and foremost. And then, one year, and this was probably, 3 years in or so, and I was so piling it on myself because I felt like I needed to teach 6 or 7 subjects every day, to now I had 5, number 6 on the way, I think. And I was drowning. And so I would go to the window every day and cry, Lord, I can't do this. Lord, I can't do this. I can't. And so that at the end of that year, David said, well, what about next year? And I said, I don't think I can do it anymore. He said, if you could just do one thing, what would you do? And I said, well, I love reading to the kids. I love reading. He said, that's all I want you to do this next year. I want you to do, don't worry about anything else. Spent 1 year only reading good literature. And yet he had access to Iowa Test of Basic Skills. And at the end of the year, we tested the kids, and they made growth in every subject areas that I never even touched. because God has created children to learn and grow, and they're going to do that in spite of us, really in spite of us, truly.
And being overwhelmed, we have really one of two responses to being overwhelmed, and this is just true in life. One is that we can give up. That would be my natural tendency, and the other is to give up to God. In 2 Corinthians, Paul asked this question: who is adequate to do this? Who is adequate? And then he goes on to the next chapter, chapter 3, and he says, God has made us adequate. And so what Paul was saying is, when we are inadequate, when we trust in God to work in and through our lives, he makes us adequate to do things that we go, wow, how did that happen? And I think of Jesus. He said, come to me, all ye who are weary and heavy laden. And I mean, that might just sound cliche. It's like, oh, that's a Bible verse, but it's reality. It truly is reality. And we have to face the fact that we're in a spiritual warfare against the world, the flesh, and the devil. And what we're doing, this is honestly, homeschooling is God's plan. I'm 100% convinced on that. It's not simple. Neither is making a great meal at home.
Yeah.
That's not a simple thing. It takes a lot of preparation, a lot of work. But boy, when you have the fragrance filling your home, it's like, wow, when's this meal going to happen? And Paul says that we are a fragrance of Christ to our children. And what greater opportunity has God given to us than this opportunity of homeschooling our own children?
Well, David and Shirley, we're going to run out of time, and I want people to know where they can go find out more, because, I mean, even as you talk, it sounds refreshing. And really, I think, a lot has changed since those early days, but a lot hasn't. I mean, the moms are still under that pressure. And I remember you told me, about a month ago, you said, kids are still going to learn what 5 times 7 is, and it was just, you're about math and science, but what you were saying to me, reminding me again, is really the important stuff is not that. The important stuff is something else. So how can they get a hold of you? How can they find out more about you?
Well, thank you. CornerstoneCurriculum.com is our web address, and that's probably the easiest. Or if you want to email, it's quine@cornerstonecurriculum.com. And we would love to chat with you about your family, your concerns, your hopes, your anticipations, your fears, and whatever.
All right. Well, we'll call it there. I appreciate it. Thanks so much for joining us. And we'll definitely have to have you on again, because I feel like we just scratched the surface of all the wisdom and encouragement you all have to share. But again, thank you to our sponsors. We appreciate their support. Everyone have a great week, and don't forget to smile.